Being Society is largely a pro-democratic project. We're really interested in the idea of democracy at its fullest, that is to say, how can people, ordinary individuals, become more involved in creating a better society? But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't consider democracy versus its alternatives. Democracy famously originated in ancient Athens, though proto-democracies existed before this. Now, Athens created a form of direct democracy in which male Athenian citizens participated in an assembly in which they could vote on issues regarding leadership and justice in the city. Nevertheless, positions of power were largely accessible only to the elite within the city. Now, direct democracy was possible in Athens. The numbers casting lots were perhaps 6,000 citizen men, so everybody could turn up and have their say. Well, everybody except women, enslaved people, and resident non-Athenians. It arguably becomes more challenging the more people are involved, although technology has made greater opportunities to replicate aspects of direct democracy in some societies. It's been replaced at state levels by representative democracy. So voters elect individuals to represent their views in Parliament. Referenda, however, are an example of direct democracy. For example, the referendum over leaving the EU in 2016. The 51 to 49% majority in favour of leaving has been cited as an example of why a simple majority may not be sufficient for major decisions, and also reflects on the fact that referenda are simply not very common within the system of government in the UK, and our election systems don't necessarily play well towards this form of direct democracy. That is to say, many people would want Brexit done differently if they were to vote again. Now, democracy in the UK has arguably only come into full existence from 1928. It was only in 1928 that the vote was extended to all women. It had only been extended to all men in 1918. While in Scotland and Wales, 16 and 17-year-olds are able to vote for the Scottish and Welsh parliaments. In England and in general elections, the age of voting is 18. Campaigners in favour of lowering the voting age to 16 point out that turnout is high, 75%, far higher than 18 to 24-year-olds, and these voters do continue to vote in a way that those who don't vote in their first election do not continue to. Today it seems obvious, a matter of simple common sense, that democracy is a good thing. For most of human history, the opposite has been the case. This is a quote from Swift, Political Philosophy. He goes on, "It was obvious to any clear-thinking person that democracy, should it ever come about, would be a disaster. How could anyone think it desirable to give power to the people, to the unruly, ignorant, self-interested mob?" This is well worth bearing in mind. We may think about democracy as being the superior system, but for a long time people did not think that. And you'll still hear it today, the idea that the vote should be restricted to certain persons only, over a certain IQ, for example. Is that really any different to previous systems where it required a certain vote level? And of course, we have ongoing questions about age of participation, as we've just mentioned, and only relatively recent changes in terms of the gender of participants. We also have a question over who can vote in which elections, depending on whether they are UK citizens or merely UK residents. And we have a question over whether people who are incarcerated should be allowed to vote, which they currently are not. But let's consider some alternatives to democracy. These include oligarchy, the rule of a small group, and monarchy or dictatorship, the rule of a single non-elected individual. In 2019, Onward, which is an influential Tory think tank, conducted a poll that revealed a notable shift towards concerns for security over freedom. Not only did 36% of voters aged 25 to 34 say that they would be in favour of the army running the country, but 2/3 said they supported strong leaders who did not have to bother with Parliament. Now, this is something that you really ought to think carefully about. It's something that we discuss in the different agendas of the leadership candidates. What really matters? Is it strong security, or is it the liberty of individual citizens to live their lives? The other thing we probably want to consider is rule by experts. If we go all the way back to Plato's Republic, he was advocating for rule by philosopher kings. That is to say, he felt that the people who were suited to the running of a just society were philosophers, those who have considered these big ideas around ethics and justice and the individual and society and so on. Now, plenty of academic philosophers probably would argue that they would not make good monarchs, but the idea that somebody with a certain level of expertise has in some ways dropped out of popularity in recent years. That is to say, is it more important, and this is something we discuss in the leadership element as well, to be good at being a politician or to have expertise in aspects of life from wider society, whether those be to do with career experience or whether they are to do with your capacity for thinking, your capacity for understanding big ideas around social justice, around ethics, around economics, and around democratic ideals. All of these are things that you may wish to consider.